Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
We're married, we make movies, and we believe that anyone in any circumstance can make a feature film.
Welcome to the Feature Filmmaker Podcast. If you want a career making movies, you're in the right place.
Hit subscribe to never miss an episode.
Let's jump right in. Okay, welcome to the podcast, Barrett.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Would you introduce yourself a little bit to our listeners?
Absolutely. So my name is Barrett Burgin. I'm a writer, director, producer. I went to film school with Kent and Anna at BYU, proud alumnus of BYU. This is my first, I've done a number of short films, award-winning short films that one of them at least is on Amazon to watch. And so this, though, Cryo represents my first feature-length film, which I actually started while I was in school before doing my final kind of BYU capstone film. That was a bad idea. I'm glad in hindsight that I did that, but this film's been many, many years in the making. So I'm very excited to talk to you guys today about it.
Yeah, we're really excited too.
Why do you say that was a bad idea? I'm curious.
Oh, I mean, I'm glad I did it. It's just to make two movies at once with a feature length film with like hardly any budget, and then jump into an intense BYU capstone experience with potentially the most intense professor at the university. It was just very overwhelming.
Yeah,
I was trying to juggle, and the films are completely opposite in tone. So one is like a dark, thrillery, scary, kind of gritty sci-fi, and then the other is this sweet musical family film. And so editing one while trying to shoot the other one was some whiplash in terms of tone, I guess.
Yeah, sometimes that's kind of nice though, to take a break and do something different, but I could see it getting confusing too. And then you mentioned the award-winning short. What was that?
So my three primary short films have all won some awards, but the one that I put on Amazon Video is called The Next Door, and it's a psychological thriller about Latter-day Saint missionaries who go on this investigation when this guy that they're teaching goes missing. And so that's probably my most wide-reaching short. And then I have a couple of others. They're also they're all kind of available everywhere online. So Out of the Ground is a sci-fi short I did. And then Father of Man is that musical kind of drama BYU film that I made, which can be found online and will shortly be available on a streaming service called Deseret Video. And so I'm excited to share that one as well.
That's great.
That's great.
Yeah, we've seen all of those. And
I've not seen Father of Man yet.
Okay, I've seen all.
I think you saw it at the film festival that it showed at. And then I was going to mention that we've been driving back and forth across the United States, and we go through Tennessee to get to Georgia every time we drive that route. So every time we're driving through those super green hills of Tennessee, I just think of Barrett Burgin's Out of the Ground.
Yeah,
I just remember my home.
Those last shots on Out of the Ground that you shot in Tennessee of those hills, there's just those huge rolling mountainous green. I'm like, I don't know, like every time I drive through Tennessee, I'm just like, this is where Barrett shot that really
That's
great.
True.
It's really memorable. Yeah.
Do you guys go near Knoxville? Are you in East Tennessee, the route that you go?
I'm not sure exactly how far. We always go through Nashville.
Okay.
On our route
Tennessee
to like south of Atlanta is where we live. Gotcha. And so, yeah, I'm not sure.
That's a little ways from Knoxville, but the whole, just like you said, it all looks like that. It's very lush, very, very green.
See, this just shows how dependent we've become on GPSs. That I'm just like, I don't even know where I went. I just did what it told me to, like an obedient.
Just followed the route.
Yeah.
Yeah. Possessy. I don't know.
Well, and then Next Door is also very good. And
thank you.
We've often said that could almost have been your first feature film.
I know. I kind of wish I had done. I just didn't know anything about anything. Like I didn't know that the film is like a weird length. To me, I just wanted to tell a story. And then I got all this feedback when I was putting it in festivals, like, it's like too long and too short. It needs to be one of these two things. And so that has been a huge process for me, learning all sorts of things about distribution and like what you actually have to keep in mind when you're trying to write a story and make a film and whatnot. But
it's really an arbitrary thing because the film itself works great. It was fun to watch. It was cool. We actually went and saw it in, I think it was the Vineyard where you premiered it.
Yeah. That's right.
And I remember thinking, like, I don't know, it felt right, but it's odd because when we're going into festivals, they're either going to program it as a short, which it was, which it's very long for a short.
How long was it again?
34 minutes.
34 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or they're going to program it as a feature, and it was too short to be that. But if it had been like a 80-minute feature, it would have been like, yeah, like great.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's just for programming reasons that it was too long or too short, but it was not for pacing reasons.
Yeah.
It was, I thought it paced great. And
thanks.
Felt cool. But I mean, I've seen like 49-minute shorts and like 67-minute features and like, so we'll see what ours ends up being, but it'll be a feature. We'll see how weird it is.
Now that you've done both, you've done some bigger shorts, you've done this feature, what do you think you'd recommend for someone trying to launch their career? Jump right into the feature film if that's what they want to do? Or do you feel like doing shorts first is a better approach?
Do you mean what I would recommend for somebody like where I am now, or looking back, if I could tell myself, somebody just trying to kind of get started?
Yeah, looking back, if you could tell yourself.
Well, okay, so I think that shorts are really useful to get stuff out, to just practice, to like tell some stories. But what a short will never do is it will never really open the kinds of doors that a feature film can. It's never going to make nearly as much money. I mean, you can land some form of distribution with a short. A good example, like Willem Kampenhout took his capstone short film and was able to work out some kind of thing with the CG bros, and by distributing it, I suppose, on their channel, it's gotten millions and millions of views. But I mean, that movie's not really made him money, or if they do see any profit from that, it's minimal, right? Likewise, even with Cryo, my feature, I'm not making money off of this yet because we did it on such a unique structuring where we did deferred pay, and most everybody who was working on it were at the time either students or really recent graduates. So they were happy to work on a fun project over the summer like they normally would. We set it up so it's like, hey, if we make money, we will pay you and you'll get paid first. But we made all our hard investments back by selling it, and there's still potential for me to make money. And more importantly, it opened all these doors because it's more legitimate. So I probably will not go back to making short films unless it's just for fun, or I just have a little thing I want to do creatively. But I think something that's important is for young filmmakers to start thinking of it as a business more than just an art. And that doesn't necessarily mean it needs to be their main form of livelihood. It's like narrative projects, but they need to think about a feature film like an asset, like you're creating something that will have value. And a short film is not much of an asset. It just take the story, take the creativity out of it. It's just like, what can it produce in terms of revenue? Something that's interesting to me is most kind of distribution, like most of the industry when it comes to distributing features, do not care about your story or really your movie. I think most of the people on our marketing team still just never saw the movie. They just know that the trailer looked good, the title was good, the poster, the key art, and then that's it. Like that's, to them, it is just literally like, can I get somebody's butt in a seat, or can I get them to press the rent or purchase button? And then like, they don't care after that. Yeah. So yeah, I would do shorts to build clout, right? I could not have made Cryo without having made the 2 or 3 previous shorts that I did, and then shorts throughout film school as well. That is what allowed me to have the network and the people willing to work on my feature, and they knew my work. They liked working with me. They knew it would be at least watchable, I hope. And so shorts are really important to like also establish your tone, to get your name out there. But you should use shorts, or a number of shorts. Do as many as you can, like get them all out, just get stuff out. But you should use those eventually to springboard to a feature. And then if in my opinion, once someone is skilled enough, and let's say they don't have any money, but they want to make something, if you could make 6 shorts, string them into a feature instead, like put them together and create some value by creating an asset rather than just posting work out there. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I love that. I totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very similar to ours and many other filmmakers' experiences. Obviously, everyone has some unique stories and there are exceptions to every rule, but that describes what sounds natural to me. I'm wondering, I want to back up and ask you a little bit more about Cryo specifically. Now, it hit theaters theatrically
like 2 weeks ago. It was
June 24th.
Yeah, June 24th, and then it hit digital June 28th.
Did you think it was gonna get a theatrical run when you made it?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I was thinking of it that way. When we were shooting it, our plan was always to hope to like sell it, but I didn't know anything about selling the movie, like what that means to sell it. And then also, I think that we were just shooting it over the summer before my last year of film school. Like Mason and I, we just wanted to make a feature. We just wanted to make something. So like if it had turned out and it was just a featured film that went to a few festivals, and then I showed it personally at a theater and then posted it online or on Amazon or something, that would have been fine with me in terms of how I was approaching it at the time. I was thinking of similar films that were really low budget, like, and super high concept, like Primer, for example, or Nolan had his very first films called Following, and he just shot it for $6,000 with some friends using like natural light and stuff. And so we were lucky enough to get it to look as good as it did just by virtue of who got involved. And then from there, I think once the film was being finished, it became clear that we probably had something that we could sell. We had no idea we would get the distribution deal with Saban. I mean, that was bigger than I was anticipating. And we got a few different offers from some notable names, but the thing about Saban is it only buys like 10 to 12 films a year versus, some of these that are 200 and it would just disappear into their library somewhere. So no, and I should have been, like, my recommendation for sure, and what I'm going to do in the future is begin with the end in mind. Like, you need to know what distribution even is, and like that distribution is where you start a movie, not an idea and writing a script and stuff. It begins with like, how does this movie get out? But I didn't know that, and frankly, we didn't really focus on that in film school. I thought, you come up with an idea, you write it down, you get the treatment, you write the script. And it turns out the industry, which I learned over the last couple of years, functions very, very differently than that.
It can. Yeah, it can. Yeah. I think especially when you're starting out, like you said, Christopher Nolan also did not really know where his film was going to go. Peter Jackson, all these great filmmakers start out just making something and they add on to it and they just keep going down the pipeline until they figure out where it leads them.
Well, and nowadays I feel like there's a distribution pathway for almost anything you could come up with. Like, there's someone who wants that kind of thing, because but what you're saying is you talk about how maybe it's not all just about like the pure idea and everything, but I wanted to ask you about that. Like, you said you did this and you shot the feature in the summer and then you did your capstone short after you shot the feature.
Yeah, that's right.
So with Cryo, at what point did you and Mason, did you guys co-write it?
Yeah, we co-wrote it. So it was an idea I had come up with a buddy of mine, not the whole twist and everything, but just the setup is something I'd come up with a buddy of mine like 2 or 3 years prior. Just after my mission, I got home and we were spitballing ideas. And then Mason and I were going to do a big Western, and we had like half the funding secured. Like, I think we had $750,000 or something, but it wasn't enough, and people were nervous. It's like, yeah, that's too low. Like, sometimes investors want to see more money put in to feel better about it. It's not like it being cheap is not sometimes impressive to a number of investors. And so we pulled the plug because we were like, we can't make this particular Western for that amount. And so we went back to the drawing board and said, well, we still just want to shoot something this summer. We blocked out the time. We've got a cool little team here together. And so I proposed this idea to Mason, and he said, oh, that sounds fun. That sounds super shootable. And so we wrote it just pumped it out over a few months so that we'd have time to shoot over the summer. So we did principal photography that summer. And then I had my last year of film school with the capstone and everything. And then the following summer, we went back and did a bunch of pickups for stuff after we'd gotten far enough in the edit where we were like, we think this needs just a little bit more to really work.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, you know, I want to ask you a little bit more about some of those logistics maybe later, but I wanted to ask, you kind of answered one of my other questions, but I wanted to ask, I know that you made this film and then you ended up having to finish school, and then this obviously hasn't been your primary source of income, so you've had a job in the meantime. And then I also know that you just had you've been married a number of years, but you just had your first kid. When was that?
Yeah, that's right.
How long ago did you guys?
So we had our daughter in December of last year.
That's awesome.
So she's about 6 months old now.
Oh, congrats. That's so awesome. Well, so my question was really, how did you balance that? Because you've been in post on this first feature, this is normal, right? We make these features, we scrape our resources together, and we kind of tailor the film to the resources we have. And then you've got to finish life. You know, you got to finish school, you got to get a job, and you got to work that job, and then you got to manage your family. And so how did you manage post on this film?
Good question. Okay, so, well, first of all, we wrapped up post like shortly before my daughter was born. So, I mean, the timing worked out really, you know, even though that was 6 months ago, this past 6 months has just been working with making sure that Saban had all the deliverables, making sure all our contracts were in a row. We stopped kind of most post shortly after we had Roxy. So thankfully that hasn't been too much of a strain. But so the post process was kind of this, and it took forever. It was in what we call post hell for a number of reasons. I think the first year is because I was still finishing school and working on another film. And that's why I say, like, it's not a great idea to make two movies at the same time. It just, one will be robbed by the other one. But so summer of 2018, we shot it. Summer of 2019, we did pickups. And then the rest of the year of 2019, I was still technically finishing school. I was in the honors program at BYU. I was trying to do this thesis that I had to go and defend before I graduated. And so December of 2019 is when I was really actually done and kind of had some more time. In the meantime, I was doing some of the editing myself because we had previously gone through 2 different editors that we had to part ways with for just different reasons. And that's part of it, is life gets busy, and these guys had jobs, and these guys had responsibilities and just a lot that wasn't really working for their availability. So then I just did it myself. And then from 2019 to 2020, we had one more editor, Aaron Hinton, come on. And Aaron's fantastic, but he definitely took a while. And so that took about a year. And by that point, I was just getting anxious. Like, I was just like, this is taking so long. And also COVID hit. And so because of that, you know, his mom, I think, is immunocompromised. So we could never meet. So I could never just sit there right next to my editor and be like, let's just plow through this. And then he also worked, you know, on a number of different projects because he has to generate his own income. And so by 2021, kind of January 2021, we really pushed. Aaron locked the cut. And then within a year, from 2021 to 2022, that was our main post. And that was a very busy, very rewarding, gratifying, but hard year, but probably my favorite part of the project. Because at that point, seeing how long it took, I realized, for me at least, you can plan a film with no money. You can shoot a film with no money, more or less. I mean, hard production costs, but people come out and play, and people will come. But post-production, man, like you have to have money to do it. And so we raised about $30,000 as a final investment and use that to pay specialists to do color and post sound and VFX and score all at the same time, which you also kind of shouldn't do that, because sometimes one will inform the other, right? You should kind of do color and then VFX, or VFX and then color. We were doing both, and we were just kind of making it work. Every day after work, because my wife and I shared a car, I would get on I bought this little electric scooter and I worked in Provo, and Eric Nauman, my post sound guy, worked in Orem, and I would get on my scooter and I would just scooter to his house, and we would work for like 4 to 5 hours, 2 or 3 times a week. And so it was extremely demanding. When other people might be playing video games or watching a show on Netflix, I was out working on this, this post process, reviewing VFX, sitting down with the colorists. We really just didn't have much of a social life, which was fine because this is what I would rather be doing. And frankly, when people say that, it's like it wasn't every single day. So we did see people. Like we saw Jessica's family. Jessica and I spent lots of time together. And thankfully, she is also involved in the industry and so supportive that it wasn't a strain, because we decided it wasn't going to be a strain. So around October, November of 2021 is when we were finally locked on all of that stuff. And actually, it might have even been over the summer. Now honestly, it's a little bit of a blur, maybe August or September. It could have been about a little less than a year ago that we were more or less locked on everything. And so Mason bought passes to the American film market. We learned a ton about distribution from AFM, which I recommend to anyone to do, whether you have something to sell or not. All of the panels and all of the seminars and things, like he attended every single one of those while I was busy making sure all the creative stuff was completely taken care of, because we did just mountains and mountains of QCs. I never want to watch the movie again because I've just seen it too many times. And so from there, we did a lot of research. Mason found a great sales agent for the film. You have to be careful in distribution, both with agents and with distributors, because you can get ripped off. But Mason had read a number of books, and this guy was recommended as a very honest, reputable guy. And so we reached out to him. He was flattered that we knew who he was. He was also impressed by the movie. And so from him, we landed some of our distribution deals. So we had one in Russia. We've had one in multiple territories. And then Saban was our big one for the North America and US. And then from there, the rest is kind of history. Although even working with the distributor was a headache. This thing never ends. That's why I'm like so glad for it to be done, is we just learned just more than I could possibly share about all of the contracts and the forms and the file types and every possible thing that you need to have lined up for giving deliverables to a distributor, which is again why it really helps to start with distribution in mind and get all that stuff while you're going, rather than what we did, which was shoot it, run and gun, and just be like, we made it, we have a story, and then have to go back
and get all the stuff
and do all of that stuff for months and months and months.
And then you'll never forget to do it.
No, never. Like, I'll just give you an example of a simple one, is provide 300 maximum quality stills. Each still has a description that describes what's happening in the scene, lists the name of every actor and the character they're playing. And I'm trying to remember what else. It's like all of this information that you have to write for each still, and you have to provide at least 300 of them. It's just like, oh my gosh, and that's just one of maybe 200 things that we had to just hurry and provide. And their lawyer was really aggressive. And so, yeah, it's definitely been a learning experience. And that's the kind of thing you want happening along the way instead.
Interesting. Yeah. No, that's so fascinating. And I feel like that's, in so many ways, I feel like, so Anna and I are on post on our feature, and you have to make a film to learn how to make a film.
That's right.
And so on the one hand, you're like, oh, I wish I'd done this all differently, but it's like, I could have gone to school forever and never learned it. And school is great. I value my education a lot, but there's just some things I couldn't learn. I mean, I've even tried to take classes on distribution or glean stuff from that, and I've learned some things. But then there's some stuff where it's like I'm only remembering it because I'm having to walk the fiery road, and then I'm like, oh, I seem to remember something vaguely about that, but now I actually have to learn it, and I don't know, you just can't always learn how to do it without just doing it.
And it doesn't stick as well when you don't
There's
have
no
something
context
to apply it to. Yeah, I remember learning about
like
markets and festivals, and I was like, oh, Oh yeah, but now
that sounds
it's
nice.
real. Yeah.
I completely agree. Well, and I definitely don't regret the educational process of it. I mean, I don't resent it. It's kind of a trial by fire. And to some extent, unless you're, kind of Hollywood royalty or you have some your first feature is going to be that. Mm-hmm. I feel like in film school, I learned how to tell a story. And by making this movie, I learned how to make a movie, if that makes sense, in terms of like how to actually make films in the industry or sell them to the industry or whatever. I learned far more from making this one picture than 4 years of film school. The reason I want to be careful with that is I want to qualify and say I could have never made this without the lessons that I learned in film school about story, about producing, about directing, about the magical wing witness and how you like keep track of everything, or the visual elements, or all of that stuff all informed the film. But you have to do it to know it or to learn it, I think.
Yeah, that's well put. I like how you said that.
No, that's something that Anna and I have talked a lot about, how we can get wrapped up in some of the technical aspects of film, but then the history and the theory will actually inform you as like a linguist in this medium. Yes. Whereas, however, we're also huge proponents of, I mean, that's like kind of like all we harp on. It's pretty much, spoiler alert for every podcast episode we'll ever do, is that the beginning, middle, and end is to convince people to make their first feature, because that's really just this, I think it's this scary thing that everyone tries to avoid or prepare for, or somehow,
or hope that it will be handed to them, or that there's a roundabout way.
And there's just nothing but just like walking through it.
I guess to your question earlier then, Kent, like, I think the only reason we were able to get as far as we were with Cryo is we weren't trying to get this far. It was just making it to make it. And so like, in some ways, it's hard to consider it my first feature, because I still see this as sort of a student film, I was a student when I wrote and directed all of what's on camera, besides maybe some inserts. And I'm proud of that. But like to me, if I had sat waiting for it to be the perfect opportunity or the perfect movie or whatever, it never would have been made. And so it's to some extent better to just go out one summer and be like, let's just try it. Let's just make something. If it's a colossal failure, then it's not a failure, because you learned all this stuff and you can do it again. And if you don't, especially doing it so low budget, there was just not very much to lose. I mean, one of the things that made it possible for us to take so long is we just didn't have investors breathing down our neck. We didn't have like a massive amount of money that we owed, that if we messed it up, like it would really hurt our reputation. There was nowhere to go but up with this movie, because it was so, like shot in a garage kind of thing. And so I think it's really smart for especially like if said filmmakers are talented or well networked or whatever, people who like working on movies. And as long as they know that they're treating it like a passion project, and then if anything comes of it, that they'll get a piece of the pie, so to speak, I think that it's absolutely worth doing. I don't know the exact story, and I can't even remember who it was or who told me, but it stuck with me, that there was a filmmaker who kept remaking his film over and over again. And he would submit it to festivals every year. And like, he just remake the movie until after iteration 7 or something, it was a masterpiece. And it like launched this guy's career. And it's because he just kept trying it again, and the first version sucked, but by version 7, he learned all this stuff, and then the door was opened, so absolutely worth it to practice and grind something out.
Yeah, you look at most feature filmmakers and who have successful careers now, and their first films no one's even heard of. That's their film school. And sometimes they even do remake it, like Damien Chazelle made Guy and Madeline on a park bench, which is essentially La La Land, but it was in its early form of him figuring out that medium.
Sans money.
And no one sees that anymore, but that was his film school. And then he went and made La La Land and brought everything he learned and all the passion to that.
Literally remaking like the same titular film is so interesting, because I know Hitchcock did it once or twice.
Yeah, that's true.
But the interesting thing is that many people say that all filmmakers just make the same film over and over again. And like Ozu is like a good example of that, where you watch it and you're like, even like Corieta now, who's like kind of a child of Ozu in some ways, maybe a nephew or but he's like, there are things that were deeply interesting to us, but like, I don't know. Yeah, you're just gonna have to fail. That's I've never heard. I would like to know who that is.
I'll look into that. I can't remember where I heard it, but I'll find it somewhere, because
that'd be great. Yeah,
I'd intriguing story.
That. So the other question I have for you is just getting into the specifics of how you approach the finances. And you did talk about that a little bit, but if we're allowed to know, like, what was the budget of the film? What have you made on the back end? All of that would be really interesting.
We shot everything for 11 grand, and that was our original budget. And that 11 grand was raised the same way that people raise similar to that amount for a short film. I put a few $1,000s into it. Mason put several thousand. We found generous, I would almost call them more donors than investors. I mean, we're going to pay them back, but they never intended to see that money back. So it was like $1 grand here, $1 grand there, 500 here, 500 there. Some parents helped, and we just kind of pooled that. I didn't do a Kickstarter because I've done that once, and I think that Kickstarter is an amazing resource that I want to be careful not to overuse, right? Because when you put it out there, it becomes like, okay, here you go. And so we Kickstarted the next door, but since then I've usually gone off of sort of the clout of whatever my previous film was. And so we were able to raise 11 grand for Cryo. And that covered really like our hard costs, that covered craft, that covered our location, our production design. You know, that crazy location where we shot was kind of preset. Roman Alevi, who we hired, brought his own Arri Alexa Classic. He had his own lights. You know, we rented some stuff, but so much of it was just either donated or pooled or whatever. And then, of course, as I mentioned, nobody was paid on the front end, none of us. And everybody knew that was the risk going in. And I preferred that. Most of them thought, well, we may never see money from this. We're just doing this for fun. And because people have jobs or school or whatever, we had a lot of day players. We were just kind of rotating through people. It was like, hey, do you want to come work 3 days on Cryo? And we, in fact, at the time in 2018, we kind of almost tried to create a certain mystique about it. And that worked. We purposely did not put out calls to anyone. We didn't post about it. We would just call individuals and say, hey, if you can work, can you find somebody for the next thing? And our tactic worked perfectly, which was that after like 5 days of shooting, we were getting like, hey, what's this thing? What's going on? Why aren't I on the shoot? And sometimes utilizing FOMO works so much better than begging somebody to come do something, because they're like, well, I don't know. But if it's like, what, there's a shoot, Barrett's doing something, what is the secret project, you know? And that got us tons of people to come and play for a day, and we could just hold the line. And our key people is who kind of maintained the vision and kept it going. And so that was all the budget that we'd spent. I mean, there were probably hundreds here or there that we didn't really count the cost of, you know, that was just gas or food or dinners for actors or whatever. And I don't mean on set, I mean just, you know, kind of whining and dining. And then once we got to that point where I mentioned where I was super stressed about post, because we finally locked the cut with no budget, and like that alone was just, it just took so long that I was like, I can't do 2 more years of this. Like I can't do, you know, begging people to work on VFX shots and whatever. I came up with a number in my mind. I was like, I think I need like 30 grand to finish this properly, you know, to buy out a sound editor, to buy out VFX artists and whatnot. And even then having to stretch it and still not everybody getting all paid at the same time. The thing is, those people got paid up front, so they will not have any deferred pay when it comes in the back end. And so because of that, while none of our rates were extremely high, the deferred pay rates were a little higher than the upfront rates, kind of balancing it out, if that makes sense. Yeah. And sure enough, I found a generous investor who watched half the film and decided, yep, I have the money, I can do it. I'm going to dump 30 grand into this. That's not that much to have to get back if we're able to sell it. That definitely made it very real. And like, we need to find distribution for this. But even doing just some of the crunching the numbers, it's like we could have made that back if we had have done our own theatrical run. Like that's just not anything for making a movie. And so the total budget was about 41 grand. And so that money went quick, just kind of spread to different places, different people. And then once we sold it to Saban, I'm not sure that I'm able to say exactly how much, but it covered all our hard investments. And so, and like I said, I'm not going to see any money from this until we've paid back our whole crew. And then if we keep making deals, then I'll be in profit. And with like the four of us who are up on the above the line, we'll be in profit. But yeah, it easily covered our 41, which was great. And so, and then paying our sales agent as well, a percentage of whatever we make from those deals. So the important thing is that nobody lost money. It's very, very good to make your investors their money back. The people who worked for deferred pay have mostly forgotten about it. They just moved on with their lives. If we make that money back, they will have a nice windfall later on, which only increases their confidence in working with me. And they are all aware, as I sent out on an email, being very transparent about what the sort of the financial process is going to look like. They're aware that my director's fee, since I had to charge one for Saban's paperwork, was $1, and that I'll be the last person to make money. And so they'll eat first. I think that's only fair, especially given the fact that I stand to win the most from this movie. Like, it's my name on the poster. It's me getting in the articles and whatnot. And so I want to make sure the crew is recognized, taken care of, and know that if anything happens with it, they'll benefit from it.
That's great. And did you predetermine with them what the deferred pay would be? So you kind of have that number.
Yep. We know our actual budget. So our actual budget, which includes that 41 of the hard investments, is somewhere closer to like between $150,000 to $200,000, which is actually kind of what it should be for a movie of this size. Mm-hmm. And so, however, that's not our budget. That's not what we write down, because that's money has never been spent. That's just money that will go into their pockets if we make money from it. But that if I were to do this again, well, I guess when I do this again, because I'll never do a deferred pay setup again. I think you have one of those, like a Kickstarter. Like,
yeah,
if you become like the deferred pay guy, and people are just like, no, man, like I'm not working. But you can do one, and when you're a student, So for my next film, I know I need at least that much. I mean, I have some treatments and some ideas that are more in the $5 million range, but like there's one I'm working on that would probably need a budget of about $500,000, and then we could just pay everyone up front, set some of that aside for marketing. It would still be a really tight, small picture like Cryo is.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
So you're still working with the sales agent to sell different rights off, right? He's
still done? That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
He's still landing deals, and I think we just got one in Australia. We don't even really see these. I mean, we see the money come in, but that's the funny part is, like, I think you guys asked me how it's been doing in theaters, and I just don't know. Like, so much of that information is no longer relevant to me. And it's not that I don't want to know. It's more that, like, they don't need to tell me, and they wouldn't be cagey about it, but it's they're not going out of their way to report to me like what their financial earnings are, right? Like how it's doing at the box office. I'll find out if they post it to Box Office Mojo, or like maybe ask them at the end or something. But they don't send us, other than like they'll send us press so that we can help promote the movie, because that helps both of us, right? We're not seeing any of that money. Oh, by the way, I think you were kind of asking this earlier, is we did a high upfront deal and more or less gave the film away for them to do what they want to, at least in our US deal, for in perpetuity, right? We were not counting on rev share, and we weren't going to try to finagle some rev share deal, because this is how most independent filmmakers get completely screwed out of their money. And they'll make something for a bunch of money and never see a cent of it, because if the distributor promises you like 50% rev share, on paper, they're the extra on marketing. They continue to market the film and then eventually declare it a loss. Even though they have made all this money, they're spending your half of the rev share. And so because we know that they do that, especially to young new filmmakers, we kind of bargained for a strong high amount that's still paid off. And I mean, I'm sure they were like, we're getting a steal. Like, we're paying these guys so little for their movie, but it was more or less cost of entry. And because it covered our hard investments, it was like, hey, this is good for both of us because nobody's lost money. We get this prestigious distributor and they get to get a movie for cheap that they're going to make some money off of. And we're not doing some rev share joke where, like, we never see a cent of it back.
Right.
And so I don't remember what made me pivot to that, but that's just, I guess, a warning for any listeners is just be really careful with those rev share deals. We didn't have the money or the counsel, the lawyers to be able to work a deal like that out where we have to check their numbers every year, every like quarter or whatever. We just had to just give us this, we'll give you that, we'll never worry about it.
Well, that's smart. Yeah, there's all kinds of horror stories.
Well, and that's something I've learned. I mean, I read a book by Litwack called Deal Making in the Film and Television Industry, and he talks about that exact thing that you described, where they'll write the costs off on another movie as a business expense, like not even your film, and then they'll be like, but then he said, but if you have a good entertainment lawyer, you can easily crack those numbers open, do a good accounting on it, and call them out, and you'll get your money. And I'm like, okay, so what you're saying, Barrett, I think is really wise, where it's like, well, we didn't have a bunch of like people.
We didn't have that.
So we just said, all right, you guys.
And we couldn't afford that. We would have to be banking. We'd have to spend more money that we didn't have to find a lawyer at the chance that the movie might do well. And I mean, some of, it's just from what I see, like reviews wise, it's done okay. It's like a 5 out of 10 for a lot of people, which I can completely live with. Like, to me, I'm just happy it's done and it got made and is out there. But that's a big risk if you don't have the capital versus, hey, here's a bunch of money. It's not nearly maybe what you could make, but it's enough to pay this thing off. And so that in the future, that's where I was going with this. In the future, I have more negotiating power to like, okay, I want this is my actual budget. We're like delegating some of it to finding an entertainment lawyer who's really going to cross their T's, dot their I's. We do it with distribution up front. We have the budget. It's all done very by the book. And then it's really on you if it doesn't work because you have all the resources at your disposal,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and if nothing else, I feel like that people putting all the money up front just makes it so that you have to do it faster because you're not balancing like a day job and you're not like, you're like, okay, we got to get this thing done and make something out of it. But
so when you raised that additional $30,000 with that investor, did you use that for the American film market to attend and did you do any festivals at all too, or was that
I don't remember. We did use some of it for festivals, although festivals, there's festivals and there's festivals, if that makes sense. By the time we were kind of getting into the festival circuit, we'd already found a distributor. So it was more for networking and connecting. And like, I think a lot of filmmakers don't quite know how to use the festival circuit, or they think that by putting it in a festival, somehow there's a deal is going to come out of that. Festivals, in my experience, unless they're the big ones, are kind of just a bunch of film friends getting together and watching stuff. And I learned that on some of my shorts where I thought like, wow, it's in this big festival. Like, this is a pretty good one. I'm excited. And then at the end, people watch it and they clap and somebody walk up to me and pat me on the back and be like, well done, bud. And like, what's next? And it's like, oh, wait, I thought something was going to happen, That's not true of the big festivals. Like there are some big important festivals that a lot can come out of and it can help us. That's right. Yeah. But more or less at every level, festivals are good for just collecting laurels. If you can put laurels on that thing and it's like a fun, cool, trendy festival and it's got those laurels to somebody looking to acquire the film and distribute it, they might know the difference, but they know the audience doesn't know the difference. And it just looks good. So it's like, it like helps it. So 3 of our big festivals are not huge festivals, but they've looked good on press. our sales agent is putting them on a version of the poster to help sell it in other territories. So like, I don't mean to poo-poo festivals. It's just that they're not necessarily the route to distribution, at least that they once were, unless it's like Sundance, Slam Dance,
Berlin.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Toronto, like, there's a few.
Tier. Yeah.
That's right. And then as far as like what money we spent, I can't remember. It might have been Mason's personal money because he's the one that really attended it. Okay. We've kind of mixed some of those things, but we always keep track of our receipts. So like I spent a bunch of my own money putting it into festivals I just wanted it to be in, like my hometown festival, the Knoxville Film Festival. I don't know if it'll get in because now it's out everywhere, but there were a few that it's like, I want to go to this. I'm willing to spend the money and I'm going to keep the receipt and send it to, our accountant basically. And then if we ever make that money back, it'll just be in a reimbursement later down the line. It's like everything we've spent, we kept track of so that in theory we could get paid back, but it'll be after all said and done, maybe. And it's a cost I'm happy to absorb because, it's worth the trip, So yeah, the bulk of them we did spend out of that amount, but special ones, I've spent a few $100 on them and I'm happy to do it.
Cool.
Well, I have a quick question, and maybe it has to be somewhat of a concluding question.
We are getting close to time, but yeah.
I want to ask, so you've described this experience, and I really think it's been a valuable thing to hear how you've walked through it. I wish we had more time, but it's clear that a big cash payout is not the value of making this film, even though that's always a possibility. And you weren't financially like, oh, we don't care about money. Like you didn't throw that out. You were responsible about it. But how would you describe as a filmmaker, career-wise, but also personally, what was the value of making this film for you?
That's such a good question, Ken, because you hit the nail on the head in that, like, we built it around making money, but making money on this particular movie was never that's not what I'm getting out of it. I consider it an investment because I do want to make money making movies, but I'm willing to trade some of that now for more later, if that makes sense. It's very much a law of the harvest kind of thing. And that, like, I consider this a seed that I can sow or like real estate. It's like you're just rolling it into the next thing, So for me, I guess, how did you phrase it? The last part of what you just said is like, how do I see this? How did you just put it, Ken?
Yeah.
What's the value?
What was the value for your career
there it is.
And personally?
Yes. Okay. Good question. So the value for me was the notoriety, the connections that it made. I mean, the fact that you guys invited me onto your podcast, it's just like that would not have necessarily happened without a project to merit it, and there are some other large podcasts that have reached out to me, other filmmakers, even if it's just local, the notoriety and the recognition and the doors that have been opened by just simply making something are not calculable. Like if I want to go and direct some local ads at places, or if I want to go pitch something to BYU TV or whatever, I have a movie that I can be like, hey, sorry, there's a train. I hope that's not messing my audio up. I can go and be like, hey, I have this movie that I made and I sold to Saban, and they know it. Some of them have reached out to me and be like, wow, how'd you do that? That's really cool. And these are people that work for a studio, that puts stuff out all over the world. And so I think the value for me personally has been also not tying, like you said, not tying all my financial resources to it. I think the old saying of like, don't count your chickens before they're hatched, right? I have gone into this assuming I will make no money. And so my financial endeavors have been disconnected from Cryo while still treating it like an investment, that it's like, hey, if it doesn't make me any actually like, hard cash, it will open the doors to make money and make more movies in the future. So that can't be everyone's value. You can't promise everyone exposure, and we all know kind of the jokes about paying people an exposure, but you can pay yourself an exposure for sure. If you're the director, pay yourself an exposure because you will get the most of it. and kind of everyone above the line benefits. Like Mason has benefited enormously. Matt has benefited enormously. Like those who are kind of in the producer, director, writer positions can write a check to themselves and exposure, and it will pay off. And so, and then of course the value has just been the education, I would say. So like, it also allows me, if I make money doing this, doing another feature, I can actually write myself a day rate now, you know, because I'll have the money up front to do it. So I think it's good not to get too greedy on your first few things. And also why it's good to have other sources of income that for me are media related. Like I use my directing skills all the time for making money, but it's not just going betting the whole farm on a narrative picture. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's something we always advise. Like,
well, yeah, I mean,
don't necessarily quit your day job right away, and
or you might be freelancing doing non-feature narrative stuff, and you know, it's whatever. I mean, like some people might even be day playing on other projects for money. Like they might be like a contract worker for features, and especially where we live.
Any of those I think work, and all of them have their risks and their rewards, right? I think a risk of freelance or doing like lots of advertising, or a reward is that you're working in the industry still, like you're on set, you're doing stuff, it's adjacent to making a movie. The risk is that you can get burnout, right? It's like, oh, I just spent all day on set and now I have to go home and work on my script. I have a 9-to-5 that's really, really flexible with me and flexible with my time. They're proud of my movie, so that's really helpful. It's media related. The reward is that I don't get burnout. I can go home and I can keep working on my creative projects, and it's not as connected. The risk is because it's a 9-to-5, when and if I do my next picture, there's some finagling and some working, and I'm not completely in control of my schedule. And so all of those have inherent risks and rewards, but I think unless you just know you are a total genius and you're crazy enough to go after it, and then you have like a 5% chance that your thing is going to be the one. I think for most of us practical filmmakers, and especially those of us who are married with families who cannot just throw everything to the wind, but are kind of living, I wouldn't call it two lives, but there's kind of two communities, two kind of overlap, right? And then you add married family and then high demand religion into that, and it's very like there's a lot of overlap there. I think it's very smart to treat this with all the sincerity and seriousness of an investment, of a business, but also with the financial reservation of a passion project, you know, that it's like, spend some money on it, spend money on this instead of a vacation or something, but don't, you know, I was never going to take out a second mortgage, right? I was never going to go all out unless I knew for sure that by betting the farm, I was going to make a return.
Yeah.
That's good advice.
That is really good advice. And, you know, and so we both are in very similar situations familially and career-wise and whatnot. But however, what differs is what you were explaining, the difference between having a 9-to-5 and being kind of freelance. And so Anna and I work for ourselves but you know, the pros to that, like you said, like we can just say, let's go shoot pickups this day next week, and we don't have to negotiate with anyone like to give us permission to do that. But at the same time, we can have a bad month, and it can be like, oh, okay, halt the movie, you know,
right?
Which luckily is still under our control, because like you said, it's that first feature is very like, you don't have anyone breathing down your neck, so it's like, all right, just pause. But that can be why some of these first features can take a very long time. Even Nolan with Following, he talked about how that was a long post-production,
like a year-long process of just shooting on weekends.
Yeah.
You know, with friends. But it's also encouraging, because I think the reason we don't see more of those is just not a lot of people do it. Not a lot of people like finish. That's the thing, is when all is said and done, Cryo is not a perfect movie. There's some problems with it. There's some things that, frankly, and I won't go into this, but there's some things that were kind of outside of my control too, you know. But at the end of the day, it's done, you know, like it's over, it's behind me. And anyone who's listening, if you finish that first feature, most people who really matter, who you're trying to get on their radar, aren't even going to watch it. They just want to know that you made it. They just want to be like, oh, you finished something, huh? Okay. And that sets you apart. The fact that Nolan did what anyone could do. Anyone his age at that time, and frankly, anyone now, even cheaper, could go out with their friends over the course of a year and shoot a mind-bendery, contemporary black and white thriller using windows as their light. It was just scrappy and smart and consistent. And you don't have to be freaking Wes Anderson or Quentin Tarantino to do that. You just have to make something and chisel away at it until it makes sense. And that's super encouraging, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's why it is so beneficial to your careers, because so few people actually do it all the way through, like you said, to the end. And so that alone is like, oh wow,
you right enough. Like, you hired a mixer and a colorist, and like you watch it and you're like, this feels finished.
Yeah,
it's right. Good. It's not just like, oh, this is like.
Right. Yeah, it's true.
Before we leave, tell everyone how we can go watch Cryo so we can see what you made.
Oh yeah. Okay, well, it's available to rent or download on a number of platforms. It's on Apple TV and iTunes, Amazon Video, Vudu, Google Play, YouTube. Like, you can buy it on YouTube and watch it there. Let me see if I'm missing any. There's just, if you have like DirecTV, it's actually on DirecTV.
Nice.
They put it all over the place. Microsoft Movies and TV, Spectrum. So all of those are ways to rent or download it. It may in the future go to streaming, or it can be streamed. It might bounce around Netflix and Hulu and stuff, but I really don't know. That'll be up to Saban, but it's definitely rentable in a number of places to watch.
Okay.
Is it doing any theatrical run in Utah anymore?
It is. Yep. So today is the last day it will be in kind of my area of Utah County. It will play for a few more days up in a couple more megaplex theaters, Jordan Commons and Valley Fair Mall, I think. It was also, I think it's done in its theatrical run in some of these other places, but it was in LA, Philadelphia, Chicago, Minneapolis, Detroit. And then, like I said, those 3 theaters in Utah. So it had a nice little local theatrical, kind of limited theatrical run, which was really cool. I'm going tonight, actually, on its last night, with my now mentor and old professor, Jeff Parkin, to watch it together, because he hasn't seen it and he's going to give me notes,
That's
like
great.
Live, I guess.
I don't know if that sounds exciting or horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it's both, but it's, I wanted it. I asked for it because I wanted some notes on how to improve. So,
that's great. I love Jeff.
I have one more piece of advice, and you can cut it out if you want, but I have to be honest about it and give credit where credit's due. Mm-hmm. So this might just be for you guys, and this might be for your listeners, but in attempting this film, I'm very religious. I'm very involved in my faith. And I just think there's value in petitioning a higher power in what you do. Like, even though this is a dark, twisted thriller that frankly might even, depending on how the viewer interprets it, they could even read it as a critique of religion. It's not, and I can explain my themes for those who watch it, but so this isn't like some family friendly, inspiring film. But that said, I think it's valuable for anyone who believes in God or a higher power, or vibes or the universe or whatever it is. For me, it's God, to approach your projects in prayer. For me, there are so many things that happened on this film that are not my doing. Like, I can't take credit for it because it was just serendipitous. It was just lucky, or to me, blessings. Like, it was just something that just happened. And so my recommendation is, if you're a young kind of scrappy filmmaker, you need to acknowledge that there's a big world out there that's bigger than you are. And so it is healthy, and whether it's from a spiritual angle or from a just kind of an internal mindset angle, it is healthy to pray for help, look for help, petition something higher and holier than you are. And so throughout this film, I was prayerful. I considered this sort of my crop, or my flocks, I guess, and was extremely prayerful on this picture, as I've been in the past, and prayed for really specific things, like prayed that the lighting would be right, or that we would finish our day on time, or we did not have what we needed for our location. So like actually praying that we would find the location that we needed, and then crazily finding it in some pretty unique ways. And so rather than being generic and general of like, oh, I just hope this really goes well and that it's the right thing to do. My advice would be to get specific in one's seeking and praying and sort of contemplating what it is that needs to be achieved in the film.
Yeah, thank you so much for adding that.
We're definitely cutting that out.
No, stop. It's definitely staying in.
I don't know exactly what your demographic is, but I feel wrong when I don't acknowledge the help that was not my own,
Yeah.
So
no, our demographic will get over it.
No, it's true. It's something we talk about a lot, just the idea that all films are faith films, first of all, just because you have to believe in it when no one else does. Yep. And I love your pointing out the specificity and praying for specific things is a good point.
That all films are faith films is actually something that Todd Gardner said. He had a great podcast called The Producer's Guide, and I don't know how religious he is personally, but he produced movies like Triple X and Pearl Harbor and all these things, and he was just like, as a producer, as an independent producer in Hollywood, he says, my job is to believe in something and just hear the word no all day long. And he's like, so you have to have faith to be a producer. Like,
yes.
I appreciated that. He's like, all films are faith films.
And it is such a big machine with so many little teeny tiny little parts that have to all be working, that it is miraculous if it turns out.
And to your point, it's finished. That alone is a miracle. Like when you've walked the road, you go, oh, this guy finished a film. Like we will all look at people who, in 10 years, 20 years, as we keep making films. And when someone comes up to us and says, hey, I finished a feature, we're going to go, okay. He finished.
Congratulations.
I can die now. I can die. I did what I wanted as a little kid. And it's like, I did it at least once. I can go into that, the gray seas, or whatever. I can sail away.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, congratulations. That is a major accomplishment, Barrett. And thank you so much for all your advice. And we will stick a link in the show notes to probably the IMDb page so people can find the film and figure out where to watch it. And thanks again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and congrats to you guys on Love and Lost. And I hope everything continues to come together. I can't wait to see it. I'm sure it's going to be fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barrett. You too.
You're welcome. Okay. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, you'll love the Feature Filmmaker Academy, a program designed to teach anyone how to finance and finish a feature film.
There are many resources teaching you how to do a great job, but what they don't teach you is how to get the job in the first place.
You cannot have a career making feature films until you've made at least one. Anyone can make a feature film using our proven model.
It's risk-free. If you follow all the steps in the program, you'll finance and finish a feature film, or we'll give you your money back.
Learn more at invisiblemansion.com/feature filmmaker or click the link in the show notes.
If you find this free resource valuable, we'd really appreciate it if you leave us a review or share it with another filmmaker. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.